Good morning, CrossPointe family. So good to have you guys here today. It is officially that time of the year where I'm absolutely sick of the heat.
Yes.
And so I just want to apologize to anybody I have been short with or grumpy to, or just, it's wearing on me. Just know that. Pray for me. Pray for rain, something. I don't know. So I got some announcements for you this morning. First off, Alyssa, stand up, Alyssa. Let us give you a round of applause. Alyssa left here a few months ago, a brand new high school graduate, and she comes back as a, what do they call you guys? Yeah, coastie? She's a member of the United States Coast Guard, just graduated from boot camp, and we're so proud of her. We'll be continuing to pray for you as you continue on in your active duty, so we're very proud of you. A couple of announcements for you from things coming up. Oh, also, the other thing I didn't tell you was this past week on Wednesday night, they had the very first Embrace Grace baby shower for our first Embrace Grace graduate. So we've gone through the program, the ladies threw her a nice little baby shower, and we just continue to pray for those, for her as for one, but we have some more ladies getting ready to start a new program that's coming up. For those of you who don't know, Embrace Grace is our partnership with our local crisis pregnancy center. Young ladies who have unexpected pregnancies. We're showing them, giving them the gospel and giving them an opportunity and support to bring their baby into this world rather than abort that pregnancy. And so far, so good. We are still actively taking donations. If you see in the foyer, there's a list there of baby items and things that we need as we continue to shower these women and help them in the next steps. And then also online, if you'd like to give financially, there's a designated fund that goes to help things like throwing baby showers and buying car seats and strollers and all of that good stuff. And so it's a good thing to be the village that helps these young moms become the best moms that they could possibly be for their children. So thank you guys for those of you who have already taken part in that, and we're looking forward to seeing what the Lord does in the rest of our time with the Embrace Grace ministry. We do have still time and opportunity. If you want to go to the Evangelism Conference on September 20th, Ontario, California at the Gateway Seminary, just fill out a Connect card. Let me know you want to go. You can put it in the treasure chest back there in the back. Man Camp is coming up. It's September 26, 27, 28, Thousand Pines. The cost there is $325. Gentlemen, there's still time. I'd like to hear today so that I can secure our spots tomorrow. And so if you're interested, let me know. If you're not sure how you're going to pay for it, let me know. We'll figure it out. But we want you there. It's going to be a good time. And so let me know that you're going to go. And then September 22nd, sorry, the date was in there, I couldn't find it. Monday, September 22nd is our first Monday Night Football Fellowship. It's football season, y'all. Hey, this is Montana, it's football season. This is what we do. Monday Night Football Fellowship will be at Jack's house for this very first one. Bring a friend, bring favorite game day bites, and come on down, let's have a good time for the game. I think it's Detroit and Baltimore, if that matters to you. If it doesn't, just come on out, have a great time, we'll watch the game together. And I think that's it. Whenever we take our Lord's Supper, we do take up a benevolence offering. That benevolence offering goes to help meet financial needs that come up within our church family. So maybe it's help somebody get gas for the week or keep the lights on for the month or whatever it is, it's an opportunity for us to share the burden with our church family and to love on them in that way. And so you'll see a smaller treasure chest back there. It says benevolence. Whatever the Lord lays on your heart to give to that, we appreciate you just loving your church family in that way. Today we're in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. So we continue on through this study. I mean, we're in like a month now, and we're going to be here until the end of November. So get cozy. Ecclesiastes and Solomon and his take on what he has discovered about life is what we will be doing. Do you guys know that, what's the guy's name? Thomas Edison invented this light bulb, right? The first practical incandescent light bulb would run for roughly about between like 13 and 14 hours. The first light bulbs that he made. And so the intention was, this is a great invention, but we need it to last longer. And so people worked on different ways, and within a year, they had come up with a carbonized bamboo filament that could extend the bulb's life from 13 to 14 hours to anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 hours. These bulbs could burn. And then in the early 20th century, there was what was called the Phoebus cartel. Sounds nefarious already. The Phoebus cartel was an international cartel of light bulb manufacturers. And they came up with the idea that they needed to reduce the standard life of a light bulb from 1,200 to, by that time, they had light bulbs that would burn for 2,000 hours. They reduced it down to about 1,000 hours. Why? Well, because you buy more light bulbs, right? And if I'm selling light bulbs, I want you to buy more light bulbs. So I tell you all that to say that light bulbs, we know that they're going to start burning and there's going to be a point when they go out. They're not made to last forever. We, however, are made for eternity. We have been created with eternity in mind. And so the title of our message today, Made for Eternity, here's the main idea. While we are fixed to earth, and we are tethered to time, we are also created for eternity. And we will live eternally, either in heaven or in hell. Now, if you're in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 with me, then remember last week we talked about the beginning of the chapter, and it begins with really what is kind of temporal, and it ends with a focus on what is eternal. If last time they helped us to see that there's a season for everything in this life, today's message will help us learn that there is a reason for everything in this life. Last week we made some observations and really just kind of some quick applications from the opening 8 verses. And we discovered this truth. That because God has a reason for each season in our life, we can trust his timing. And so I want to circle back just quickly this morning to look at those opening verses and just kind of pull in that the beginning portion of this chapter then as we go into the end of it. So we said we can trust God's timing, right? Those first 8 verses, Solomon states in verse 1 really kind of his thesis. And then he illustrates it through the next 7 verses. He says, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. And then he uses 28 statements, right? It's like 14 of these negative, positive comparisons that make this complete whole picture of the human experience. Solomon describes both despairing and delightful times and how they are each having their own season, their own time. So I'm just going to walk through them quickly because I didn't go into real depth with them last week, so I just want to brush over them again. Notice the key word in all of these is time. We're called to receive rather than resist these rhythms of life. The time of life, it runs in this rhythmic course, and we are not to run against it, but to receive it willingly and to trust God in the midst of it. It's like the psalmist says in Psalm 31:15, my times are in your hand. And so he says there's a time to be born and a time to die. Right? God appoints both our first day and our last day on this earth. Just as we accept birth as God's gift to us, we have to also accept death as being God's sovereign control over our lives. Unless the rapture comes first, every one of us is going to have to keep two appointments, birth and death. He says there's a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. This is true in the plant world as well. God gives seasons to sow and he gives seasons to reap. There's a day of birth for the plant and there's a day of death for the plant. He says there's a time to kill and a time to heal. The word here for kill is not murder, but it's a word that is used for capital punishment. There's a time for punishment to come, and there is a time for wounds to be healed by making things right through things like reconciliation. He says there's a time to break down and a time to build up. There's a season for destruction and there's a season for construction. He says there's a time to weep and a time to laugh. And in some sad situations, we should be weeping, and in happy times, we should be laughing, right? Romans chapter 12 tells us that we need to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Also in verse 4, he says, there's a time to mourn and a time to dance. The word here for mourn is talking about wailing or lamenting. We know what dancing is, I hope, right? I know Southern Baptists don't dance. We boogie. There's a time for dancing. He says there's a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. I had to look into that one a little bit. It just seemed kind of weird to me. I never really thought there was a time like, I just want to gather some stones. Solomon seems to be referring to the practice of throwing stones at one's enemy or dumping rocks on his good soil as a way to keep him from growing crops. We see this happening in 2 Kings chapter 3, where they would go out to their enemies' fields and they would just dump rocks all over it so that it would ruin their crops. Solomon says there's a time to cast stones away and there's a time to gather them. And he says there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. There's a time to be close with others and a season where it's good to get alone in order to reflect and refresh. He says there's a time to seek and a time to lose. Sometimes we are called on to search hard for something and other times we have to just let it go. It says a time to keep and a time to cast away. I think of the times when, as a young parent, I had 3 kids very early, and we just acquired all the baby equipment we could possibly get, right? We had all the hand-me-downs, the strollers, and the swings, and all of that different stuff. And then once they were not kids anymore, we just moved it on, just got rid of all of it. And now my grandson's here, and I got pack and play in my living room right now. Like we just bring it all back in. There's a time to keep and there's a time to cast away. There's a time to tear and a time to sow. The word tear refers to tearing the garments as if in an expression of grief or mourning. And sowing speaks of a readiness then to put back together and move forward. He says there's a time to keep silence and a time to speak. You know, we've all had the experience of saying something at the wrong time, haven't we? I think of Proverbs chapter 15, verse 23 says, to make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. But that word has to be in season. We have to understand that there is a time to speak, of course, but there's also a time when we need to keep silent. There's a time to love and a time to hate. This phrase covers life's two basic emotions. While we're not to hate people, we are to hate our own sin and to be repulsed by the rampant evil that we see in our world today. The Apostle Paul's admonition in Romans chapter 12 is to hate what is evil and to cling to what is good. He says there's a time for war and a time for peace. You know, we talked about the song Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds last week, and they added a few extra words to that verse in the 60s. It was an anti-Vietnam anthem. But we have to realize that true peace will only come when we turn from sin and we turn to the Savior, who is the Prince of Peace. And so while we are fixed to earth and tethered to time, we are also made for eternity, and we will live eternally in heaven or in hell. Yes, there is a season and a time for all of these different things in our lives. But our time here on earth, our time fixed to this state of time is not all that we were intended for. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 9. I'm going to read down to the end of the chapter in verse 22. Solomon writes, "What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beast, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, For that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? Just a few observations and some applications here this morning. The first thing is that we need to accept that we are made for another place. Accept that you are made for another place. In verse 11, he says, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. When Solomon observed the unpredictable times and changing seasons of his life, he concludes that there has to be something more to this. Listen, in verse 9, this is just despair. He's like, what gain has the worker from his toil? Right? We have already talked about all the different work that Solomon has done. And he's like, what is there to gain from any of that? He understands that when we seek satisfaction on a horizontal level, we will remain unsatisfied. In verse 10, he goes on and says, I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. And that word business that we talk is a word that is used for burden, for oppression, for affliction. And something happens here. I mean, with the exception of a few verses in chapter 2, God's name has really not been mentioned in Ecclesiastes. But it all changes in verse 10. And all the way down through verse 18, we see references to the Almighty. It's 10 different times. Verse 10, he says, God has given. Verse 11, he has made everything beautiful. He has put eternity into man's heart. What God has done. In verse 13, he says, this is God's gift to man. In verse 14, whatever God does, God has done it. Verse 15, and God seeks. Verse 17, God will judge. Verse 18, God is testing them. Now he understands that God is active in what's happening under the sun. And it is God alone that has an eternal view. And all we have is a point of view in which isn't any bigger than just a little point on the timeline of life. Once Solomon is reminded of God's rule and reign over everything, everything begins to make some sense to him. Solomon's, achievements, his victories, his wins, they would come and go, but only God's glory is eternal. Only God is unchanging in the midst of changes that we see throughout this life. Solomon really kind of comes to three conclusions after he gets this thing straight in his mind and in his heart. He recognizes first that God has made everything beautiful in its time. Even when we go through terrible times, even when we have some of the most sour seasons of life, we have to remember that he has made everything beautiful in its time. Some of you might need to write this down. It's just trusting in God and his will means trusting in his timing. God always acts for our ultimate good, even when it doesn't seem like it's for our immediate good. God is always acting for our ultimate good, even when it does not seem like it is working for our immediate good. If you're like me, we're all about immediate good. We want it our way, right away. But God has made everything beautiful in its time. And we need to trust his timing. The second thing he realizes that he has put eternity into man's heart. We are made with a longing to know God because he has implanted eternity in our hearts. We see it in Romans chapter 1, verse 19 says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them." I love this quote. It's been said that there is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every person, and it can never be filled by any created thing. It can only be filled by God, made known through Jesus Christ. Eternity has been written in your heart, and that yearning to know God comes from what he has planted there. Similar to what Augustine said, he said, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. We cannot fully understand who God is and what he does. That's what Solomon concludes. While we can know a lot about God, right? We can know a lot about him through studying his word, what he has revealed of himself. We can study his order of the world and know something about him, but we can't know everything about him or why he does what he does. If you could know everything about God, that would make you God. 1 Corinthians 13:12 says, "For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been known fully." We are not going to know everything about God, nor will we be able to understand everything that he does. God has set a definite time for everything, but he's not revealed all the details to us. You know, it's like Job kind of comes to this realization in Job chapter 26. He says, "Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways, and how small a whisper do we hear of him. But the thunder of his power, who can understand?" So yeah, we know a little bit about God, but we'll never fully understand or know all about God and what he does. You see, while we are fixed to earth and tethered to time, we are also made for eternity and will live eternally in either heaven or hell. And so Solomon says next that we need to enjoy life. Enjoy this life. In light of God's reign and rule, we are called to live a life of rejoicing. Listen to verse 12 and 13. He says, "I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man." Right? If I was translating this, it would say he should eat and drink and take pleasure and watch football with buddies on Monday nights. This is God's gift to man. In my time in reading through Ecclesiastes, I come across just another very encouraging verse. No matter how hard life is, God can give us joy in the journey, right? In chapter 5, verse 20, which we'll get to in a few weeks, it says, "For he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart." We're meant to enjoy this life. It has many blessings. God's intention for us is to have reason after reason after reason to rejoice. It's the sin in our hearts and it's the brokenness of this world that makes it so unenjoyable. We can turn and look to God and perceive that there is nothing better for us than to be joyful and to do good as long as we live. Third thing he says, we need to revere God. Because God is sovereign, we have to submit to him. We must submit to him. It is tantamount. I came across this quote from a pastor this week. He said, "Can you worship a God who isn't obligated to explain his actions to you? Because that's exactly what you're called to do." While God wants us to find joy when going through the junk in this life, his ultimate aim is for us to revere him. Verse 14, Solomon said, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That fear is reverence, it's awe. He goes on and says, that which is already has been. That which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. This tells us that God is eternal and he's immutable. It's a $50 seminary word for you. He is immutable. Nothing can be added to his work, and nothing can be subtracted from it either. You know, there's this Westminster Shorter Catechism, which is kind of a statement of belief, but it defines God this way. It says, God is a spirit, infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. That's what immutable means. He does not change. In his being, his wisdom, his power, his holiness, his justice, his goodness, and truth. He is worthy of our reverence. The word fear that Solomon uses means to revere with holy awe, right? It's defined, I heard one definition of it said, is a trembling trust. God works his ways and his will in such a way that we need to respond to him in holy reverence. He later on in chapter 5, verse 7, it says, but God is the one that you must fear. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12 says, and now Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the Lord your God? We are called to have a holy awe, a reverence for our God. I think of Job, who after, unleashing questions and hurling accusations against God, he finally ends up confessing, right? And this trembling trust that he has. In Job chapter 42, he says, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. He said, I recognize I had no reason, no right to question you or accuse you. That what you have done has already been done. What you're going to do has already been done. And nothing will thwart that. Oswald Chambers said the remarkable thing about God is that when you fear God, you fear nothing else. Whereas if you did not fear God, you fear everything else. We must have a reverence for God, because while we are fixed to earth and we are tethered to time, we're also made for eternity, and we will live eternally in either heaven or hell. Fourth thing Solomon says, we need to rely on God's justice. Like Solomon, like us, Solomon became troubled when he looked around and he saw injustice happening in the world around him. Verses 16 and 17, he says, "Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness. And in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work." I love that word "moreover" here. He used "moreover." He's saying also or still, showing us that this is yet another thing that does not bring satisfaction. It's like he's saying, and yeah, check this out. I saw something else. There's a lot of injustice in our world today. I don't have time to even get into the subject. There's a lot of injustice in our world today. Well, Micah 6:8 calls us to make a difference by speaking up and standing up for what is right. You want to know what the church should be doing in the state of our world and our culture, in the state of our political landscape and our, just the overall injustice that we see going on in our world? The prophet Micah told us. He said, "He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." Ultimately, we have to trust God to straighten out what is crooked and to make right everything that is wrong. That's what Solomon concluded in verse 17. He said, I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. You have to trust that God is a just God and he will work out his justice. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may take a year, I don't know. But what I do know is I need to trust him for his justice, and I need to trust his timing. God will not ignore injustice forever. Just repeat it. Ecclesiastes, when we get to chapter 12, he says, "For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil." So, we ask the question all day, when the file's coming out? God will bring the files out. Because he will bring every deed into judgment, every secret thing, whether good or evil. In the meantime, we have a responsibility to guard our actions and guard our attitudes so that we don't become filled with some kind of self-righteous anger and feel like we have to take things into our own hands. Romans chapter 12 is really a good corrective for us. It says, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord." And so we just rely on God's justice. And then finally he says that we need to live like you're dying. Live like you're dying. Let's look at verses 18 through 21 again. He says, "I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beast, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return." There's really two truths that I want us to see here, just in these closing verses. The first one is that depravity is our descriptor. The phrase children of man reminds us that we are all sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. And because of the sin nature that we have inherited from them, we oftentimes act like beasts. And there might be part of you that kind of recoils and, oh no, not me. Not I, Pastor. I don't even act like a beast. I assure you, you do. And I do. We all do. It's in our DNA. Depravity is the best descriptor of our humanness. The second truth is dust is our destiny. While Solomon considered how animals die, he realized that humans die in a similar way. We come from dust and we go back to dust. It's exactly what Genesis chapter 3, verse 19 said, where you are dust, and to dust you shall return. That moment in the garden, the fall, it destined us for dust. And so it leads Solomon to ask the question in verse 21, who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? It's a good question for all of us to ponder. And I'm glad Solomon brought it up here so that we can talk about it on a random Sunday morning in September rather than waiting for somebody else to die to bring up the question, which is often what we do. And the question is this: do you know where you will go when you die? And it's uncomfortable and people don't like to talk about it. And it's like, oh man, why are you talking about death? Because death is a certainty for all of us. Or we're going to just ignore it? Will your spirit go up or go down? I like that analogy. I mean, it's really figurative language, right? The idea there is that heaven is up and hell is down, but I mean, it's like, it's down here. Is it down in Japan or is that up in Japan? I don't know, right? It's like, is it the good place or the bad place, right? We have these analogies that we use, but do you know where your spirit will go? Your eternal spirit that is created for eternity. This flesh that you inhabit, we know goes back to the dust. From the moment of the original sin, this began to decay and die, and it will go back to dust. But the spirit that we were created into is eternal. Where will it go? Later on, Solomon fleshes it out a bit more in chapter 12. He says, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Now, we all know that in our sin nature, we cannot be spiritually in the same space as God. And without an atonement for our sin, then there's no entry to heaven. There's no way we can come into his presence and spend our eternity there. Our eternity then is the spirit that goes down. It goes to hell. And so what's the answer? Well, the answer is Jesus. The answer was the one who could live a perfect life in order to be a perfect sacrifice that was offered up by himself, our perfect high priest, that would atone for our sin nature once and for all. And the Bible says that then if we confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord, and then we believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, then we will be saved. And we can answer that question definitively, that when I die, my spirit will live eternally in heaven in the presence of God. But without Christ, the only answer is then I have no adoption into God's family. I have no right, no inheritance in heaven. And so my spirit will live eternally separated from God, wherever that is, down, around, somewhere outside of Compton, who knows? It's hell. And it's eternal. Now, I don't know about you, but eternity to me sounds like an awfully long time. And so recognize today that you are dying. I've always said that as a pastor, I'm the one that got to break all the bad news to everybody. I got it for you today. You're dying. From the moment you were born to die. Death was our inheritance. We need to live like it. But in that dying, we must recognize that while our flesh tethered to earth, tethered to time, our spirit is made for eternity, and it will live eternally, either in heaven or in hell. So let's just summarize what Solomon said here. He said we need to trust God's timing. We need to accept that we are made for another place. While we all have our ties here and we all have something about this world that we absolutely love, we are made for someplace else. We need to enjoy this life. It really, really goes fast. Back there is Ray. Ray's my brother from another mother. We have been friends for 35 years, something like that. And it seems like just yesterday, we were on the basketball court at Sequoia Junior High School, just fooling around, a couple of kids, and it just goes like that. Enjoy this life, because it moves fast. And it's not all that there's going to be. But while you're here, make the most of it. Enjoy it. Revere God. If you don't fear anything in this world, it should be God. Rely on his justice. Because where we see injustice, where we oftentimes want to do something about it, there are going to be things that God can call you to do, but the reality is you need to do justice in your own life, and love kindness, and walk humbly with God. And then number 6, live like you're dying, because you are. We often talk about things like, what would you do if you found out you only had 30 days to live? Hopefully, for you, the answer is I do exactly what I'm doing right now. If it's not, then you're not living like you're dying. Give your life to Jesus so that you can know what happens when your body goes back to the earth Your spirit has an eternal address. You want to know what that is. And without Christ, with or without Christ, you know. So make the choice. I appreciated this insight. You know, I do a lot of, in my sermon prep, I do a lot of like Google searching and I just like to pull out quotes and read articles and just see what people are saying. And I came across this insight from, there's a website I think it's called Got Questions, right? You just ask questions. And one of I'm not even sure what the question was, but the answer was, just caught me and said, in every human soul is a God-given awareness that there is something more than this transient world. And with that awareness of eternity comes a hope that we can one day find a fulfillment not afforded by the vanity in this world. Life is but a vapor. But we know there's something past this life. We have a divinely implanted awareness that the soul lives forever. This world is not our home. We hunger for heaven. Even as we are, seem like we're just kind of on this treadmill of time. We're just chewing it up, but doesn't feel like we're getting anywhere. We hunger for heaven. God has planted in us, or has planted us in time, but he has also implanted within us a longing for this eternity that we were created for. I'll finish with this in the book Mere Christianity, the classic by C.S. Lewis. He said it this way. He said, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. You and we were made for eternity. And so while we're fixed on earth and we're tethered to time, we are made for eternity, and we will live eternally in either heaven or hell. I hope you know exactly which one it is for you today. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word this morning.